So Justin Trudeau, who might be the most liberal and progressive leader any Western country's ever had, he's reshuffled his cabinet. Now, I think what's interesting here is how three of his selections illustrate how willfully ignorant the left is when it comes to the issue of culture, religion, ethnicity, ancestry, and nationality. These are all social constructs according to the left. They don't matter, but the left is wrong about this because these things do matter. They do influence the way people think and the way people act. Now, the first example of this is Chrystia Freeland. Her mother was Ukrainian. She has two Ukrainian grandparents and she has a very strong attachment to Ukraine. She has just been appointed by Trudeau to be Foreign Minister. Now, this is Chrystia Freeland talking about her childhood. I remember being surrounded by politics from the moment I was born. She's talking here about her grandparents, Michael and Alexandra, who were Ukrainian. Their experience had a very big effect on me. They had heated political discussions. They were also committed to the idea, like most in the Ukrainian diaspora, that Ukraine would one day be independent and that the community had a responsibility to the country they had been forced to flee to keep that flame alive. Now, does this mean that Chrystia also shares this sense of responsibility? Does she also see herself as being part of the Ukrainian diaspora? Does she feel a sense of responsibility and a duty to look after Ukraine's interests and to protect Ukraine's independence? And if she does, I mean, is that a problem as the Canadian Foreign Minister when she's going into bat? Is she going into bat for Canada or is she going into bat for Ukraine? Now, this is very important because when we're talking about Ukraine's interests, its independence and its security, what we're talking about here is Russia. Russia is the country who's a threat here. So this will potentially influence her opinions, her actions in her role as Canadian Foreign Minister in her dealings with Russia. Now, when we're talking about Russia here, we're not talking about an obscure country in Central America or Southeast Asia. Russia is an important geopolitical player. In fact, for Canada, after the United States, it's possible that Russia is the most important country in terms of its international relations, mostly because of the situation in the Arctic, the melting sea ice, the opening up of the Northwest Passage, the competing territorial and maritime claims, the potential conflicts that that's going to lead to regarding hydrocarbons, gas, drilling, oil, etc. So this is an important issue here. She's very strongly identifying with her Ukrainian ancestry. She grew up speaking Ukrainian at home, so Ukrainian is probably her mother tongue, really, and she herself speaks Ukrainian at home with her own daughter. She owns an apartment in Kiev with her sister. She changed her name from Christina to Chrystia, which is the Ukrainian form of the name. She is a very vocal critic of Russia, so much so that she was placed on Russia's sanctions list. She's actually banned from going to Russia. And here is her response on Twitter to that ban. Love Russia, love my years in Moscow. It's an honor to be on Putin's sanctions list. Okay, so this is a lady who's going into this job with a very strong opinion on Russia, which is probably even shaped by her Ukrainian ancestry. And this is something which may be a problem in her role as the Canadian Foreign Minister. Here is Freeland speaking in the Canadian Parliament. She's speaking here during a debate on a Canadian-Ukrainian free trade deal, and she was the Minister of International Trade at the moment. Now, what she's wearing here is actually Ukrainian national dress. Now, she's the Canadian Minister for Trade, and she's involved in a negotiation with Ukraine, and here she is speaking in the Canadian Parliament in Ukrainian national dress. You can see better here what it is that she's wearing. This is a traditional Ukrainian outfit. The second appointment that I want to talk about is Ahmed Hussen, who came to Canada as a 16-year-old from Somalia. He was a refugee. Now, he has been appointed the Minister for Immigration. Here's an article from CBC, and Hussen is talking about his background. He's saying, each of us coming into public life are informed by the different experiences they bring to the table. Now, he's coming from a very specific background. He's a black Muslim Somali refugee. He said each of us are informed by the different experiences they bring to the table. I'm no different in that sense. I'll bring my experience as an immigrant to Canada, also an immigration lawyer, someone who worked many, many years as a community activist. Now, Hussen is very much pro-immigration. I'm extremely proud of the fact that Canadians have always been welcoming here. People who've sought asylum, we've been the better for it. The story of Canada is the story of immigration. So again, like Chrystia Freeland, you have to ask, is his personal background influencing his opinions on immigration? Does he share the same views on immigration as most Canadians? Clearly he's coming from a very different background. I mean, is this a problem? Is it wise appointing someone who's coming from a very specific background which is different to the vast majority of Canadians? Does he share the concern that the majorities of Canadians will have about immigration, particularly Muslim immigration? Now, to be fair to Hussen, he appears to be a model Muslim immigrant. Here are some comments that he made in a speech to a US Congressional Committee on Radicalization of Muslim Youth. I'm a Canadian Muslim who's proud of his faith. I believe in the Canadian American values of democracy, liberty, rule of law, human rights, and respect for minorities do not contradict the tenets of my faith. It is a fact lost on many that Muslims, including Somali Muslims, can best practice their faith in societies such as Canada and the United States that guarantee the rights of individuals, including freedom of worship. The civil rights of our community members must be protected, but it is equally important to disseminate these integration-friendly messages in order to contribute to a process where our community emphasizes the defense and attachment to the countries of Canada and the United States. So these are all very, very admirable statements he's making there. He appears to be a model Muslim immigrant who is very much accepted and adopted the values of Canada. So he's talking here about young Canadian Somalis and the difficulty that they get in finding employment. The response of the majority of these young people is to persevere and keep working hard. A minority of them become alienated and fall victim to a narrative that turns them against Canada and the United States, the very countries that have sustained them and also given refuge to their parents. This dangerous and constant anti-Western narrative is fed to them by radicals in the community. So these are all encouraging and admirable statements by Hussen, who appears to have integrated quite well into Canadian society. I mean, does this mean that we shouldn't have any concerns about someone in charge of immigration who themselves is a black Muslim immigrant who came to Canada at the age of 16? I don't know. It's still a concern for me that they would perhaps be more open to accepting immigrant groups who maybe the majority of Canadians aren't willing to accept. The third appointment I wanted to talk about was Maryam Monsef. Now, she is from a Afghan-Iranian Muslim background. She came to Canada at the age of 12. She has just been appointed Minister for Women. Now, these are some comments that she made about Sharia law. Here she is talking about the nikah ceremony, a Muslim wedding. The nikah ceremony is a great symbol of the whole matrimonial process. Sharia fascinates me. Smiley face. I think that's an extraordinary thing to say for someone to be, quote, fascinated by Sharia, to be in charge of women's affairs in Trudeau's government. So we've three appointments. We've Chrystia Freeland, who is a very, very vocal critic of Russia and whose opposition to Russia may very well be based on her Ukrainian ancestry. And does this compromise her ability to act impartially and in the interests of Canada in its dealings with Russia? We've Ahmed Hussen, who is from a very particular background. He's a black Muslim Somali immigrant. Now, to be fair, as I pointed out, he does appear to have embraced the values of Canada, and yet at the same time he's making statements, ambiguous statements like this: each of us are informed by the different experiences they bring to the table. So does that mean he's going to be influenced by his own experience as being an immigrant? Is he going to be more sympathetic to immigrants because of that? And finally, we have this lady, Maryam Monsef, a Muslim who is, quote, fascinated, smiley face, by Sharia, and she is in charge of women's affairs. I mean, is this a potential conflict? Sharia and is something which seems to me to be fundamentally at odds with the idea of female equality. So do these three appointments raise questions for Trudeau? Are these three ministers capable of performing their duties in an impartial manner? Well, let me know in the comments what you think.